People's homes are not clinics. They're their real homes. I know a lot of times we would get some discussions from texts and say, oh, every time we show up, mom disappears and goes and takes a nap. Why do you think she's taking a nap? I had a parent who was really averse when her child hummed. Consultant was like, well, that's just part of who this kid is. They're going to hum. That's a stim. And then the parent was like, but I don't like it. Fast forward a little time later, and I got there to the session and the mom was in tears. And she said, I slapped my kid. Like, I could not handle the humming anymore. And she was like, I feel horrible. I'm a terrible mom. Client is the child, the learner, but it's also the family, the parents, the caregivers. We have to give them the tools. Welcome to ABA Business Leaders Podcast, brought to you by 3 Pi Squared. I'm April.
I'm Steven.
So today we have Zandra from Beauty and Behavior. I came across her work on social media, and there were some of her posts or reels or whatever that came through, and I was like, I connected with it so much, right? And so it really definitely caught my attention. And so then I went over to her website and I checked her out, and I'm just reading through your stuff on your website. And immediately I said, okay, I have to reach out to her. I need to have a conversation with her, and hopefully she'll come on the podcast to chat about all of the things.
Right.
So Zandra, what really stood out to me is your focus on helping professionals support families in a way that creates lasting change. You talk about not sacrificing their values or their sanity. And that really aligns with a lot of the conversations that we have here to support business owners and business leaders. And I think that we have a mission that we've been wanting to get to that we haven't been able to put as much time into. And that is then how to help those business leaders to support the families in a better way. Right? Zandra, we're so excited to have you today. So before we jump into our topic, I would love to hear a little bit about your work and what led you into this work with parents and just kind of the why behind the cause.
Yeah. Thank you both for having me here. So hello, everybody, all the listeners. My name is Zandra. I am a BCBA. I've been in the ABA space, in the autism services space specifically, for over 12 years now. I've been everywhere, really, in the homes. I've been in the clinics. I've been in the schools. I've jumped from company to company over the years due to, my own experiences with burnout, and we'll get a little bit into that. But beauty and behavior was something that I started in 2020. I was a BCBA at the time. And at that point in my career, I was seeing a lot of challenges with retention, right? I saw some good colleagues leave due to burnout, due to just the many challenges that we all face being in this space, right? So beauty and behavior started out as a blog, really just to put the word out there. My intention behind it was to share what ABA is, what it is that we do as providers in this space. My main intention really was to inform people outside of the field and say hey, this is a really cool space to be in. Why don't you come join us? I was really honest about my experiences as far as challenges that we faced. I didn't want to shy away from that. I really wanted to share the good, the bad, and the ugly about our field. I didn't want to shy away from talking about the challenges, but I definitely also wanted to highlight what we do to support the families and the individuals that come to ABA for their needs. And so I wanted to bring to the table really the beauty and understanding what behavior is and what can come out of that. So that is how beauty and behavior was born. That led me to really creating a following of providers. Now, my intention, right, was to reach people outside of the field, but the more I grew and grew, my presence grew, providers found me. So RBTs, BCBAs, teachers sometimes. And same thing as you, April, a lot of people started to reach out and say, hey, your words are really resonating with me. I'm experiencing this too. And it really stuck to a lot of people. And so that came the inquiries, right? Hey, are you consulting? Do you provide remote supervision? I didn't think about it at that time. I had no plan really to take beauty and behavior and form it into a business, but really my audience led me to that point. So I did start offering consultations. I did start offering remote supervision. And this was simultaneous to me building my career as a BCBA. So I went through the whole BT. They didn't have RBT at the time. So I was a BT up until the point I was a BCABA, jumped into BCBA. And so full-time employment and then beauty and behavior after hours.
That is, there are a couple of things here that I wanted to bring up because I could see the connection between them. And so, you have a lot of content talking about burnout, right? And part of that is a lot of what we talk about here too, like being able to assess like what's essentially filling your bucket and what's draining your bucket, right? And building your dream job and knowing what you enjoy doing and what you cannot stand to do. Now, of course, we're adults who own businesses. And so sometimes we're going to have to do those things that we don't care to do because, that's just life. So, but, those aside, it's really nice to know, okay, so we talk about this, but it's also nice to know that, hey, here's an actual real life version of what this could look like. Right. And so because a lot of those things that drain your bucket are like dealing with, high caseloads, high turnover, insurance. And in the high caseload itself, we could come up with like 20, 30 things, right? Like there's just a lot of barriers there, right? And then also too, I think there's something to the mindset of, okay, we're the expert coming in, essentially teaching you how to parent your child, right? And so I guess it kind of depends too. Either it's clinic based and there is a big, I've seen some clinics do it well where they bring parents in for parent training like once a week and stuff like that. And they'll be flexible to go into the home and do some generalization and stuff like that. But for the most part, if it's in clinic, it's like, it's so separated. This is what's happening at clinic and this is what's happening at home. And a lot of times they don't even see the same behaviors. Oh, in home, sometimes as BCBAs, like we come in a little forward, a little too in charge and just take over and tell families what to do. Right. And so there's got to be like this medium here.
And so Zandra, your model is like parent led only, or do you work with the kids, or like how does it work?
Yeah. So when I started working in that model through that company, it's case by case, right? We have a vendor out here in California who I think is really leading the charge with the parent-led model. I don't really see it across other funders, sometimes maybe, but really just one funder. And case by case, we'll take a look at, okay, is this a situation in which it would be recommended for me to just sit down with parent, mom, dad, or caregiver involved to support them with what to do. They come to me with what challenges they're facing and we talk it through together. Or is this a situation in which they would benefit more, right, with me being in the home or being there in the home with the child to provide modeling for those strategies. Some of the families were okay with, had some success, right, with talking it through, going about their day and then reporting back like, hey, I really just focus on reinforcing my child throughout the day for the things that I wanted to see more of. And that was magic. Thank you for that. Right. So it really depends, I think, on the family. And now within beauty and behavior, now that I'm no longer tied to an employer through my business, I do more of just of that coaching approach of where it's me and parent. I do everything remotely at this time. I do want to offer in the future some of that in-person support. I am a new mom. I'm a stay-at-home mom. So not a season, but hopefully a season in the future.
Right. And why do you think that more companies don't do social skills groups? Because, like when I'm talking to a clinic, I'm like, you have to add social skills, right? There's so many reasons why you would want to do that. Number one, like it's more profitable, right? Like if you're just talking money, it is more profitable. And then you can take this huge wait list that you have in the after school time, right? And you could create social skills groups. And it's great for the kids because if you can if you can work with a 25-year-old bubbly RBT, right? Okay. But if you can't generalize these skills to peers, right? Like, what are we doing? Right. And social skills can really help with that model. And then you can have those group parent trainings, right? And so, do you have any guess as to why clinics kind of shy away from social skills?
When I was working out of that agency at the time, when my focus was social skills groups, I did see challenges with client matching.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Client matching, I think, is one of the challenges there with ensuring that the learners' skill sets were good matches to work together within a group. It's also, that was the only experience that I've seen really with how a agency runs social skills groups. I'm sure other agencies might have different things to say about it, but because it was insurance funded, all of the kids were on were in different points they were all in different points in time within their treatment authorization.
Sure.
So
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
That was really when we had a social skills group, that was our biggest barrier, was to be able to group the appropriate, like the kids together appropriately, right? Because you can't, you have to be working on at least similar or coordinating skill sets, or it's just kind of one-on-one within a group, and then you need more therapists and like more text to get that going, right? Because if you don't have kids, you can work on parallel play or something like that, right? But I think it does get complicated beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. With the billing and the scheduling and everything, those were definitely challenges that we saw come up. I was in a work group to kind of just brainstorm ways that we could make it an easier process. I didn't see the turnout of that, unfortunately, but I know that there are agencies out there who are trying to make it work. I'm peer certified. It's a social skills group focused certification out of UCLA. And watching their model, I was always interested to look further into it actually about, how's the structure of the funding for this? Because that's something that we weren't able to do seamlessly in the agency that I was working out of, right? Because watching peers and, someone within UCLA probably could support with more information about this. But learning through their certification, I saw that each of the kids, they all have within a group a start date and an end date together. So it might have been maybe like a 3-month program. It's the same peers within that group from beginning to end. But then within our agency, again, each of the kids they're at different points in their authorization period. So we might have one group with 8 kids in there. And in January, we have two kids that started together. We have maybe others that move out of the group or graduate out of the group because they've completed all their goals, and then they switch them out with newer ones. It was a challenge. Yeah, they had new peers ever so maybe every 2 weeks.
There is a lot of that. That's a lot of challenge to coordinate that, and I think sometimes it is like looking at, especially when you're with the insurance model, kind of looking at balancing those challenges and making it worth your while.
Again, like tying it back to the parent piece, it was a social skills group model. But within our social skills group caseload, we made sure to have that parent involvement piece there, right? Yeah. Because obviously parents are not involved, at least within our agency. We didn't have parents involved in the social skills groups, right? So we made sure to connect with the parents outside of groups and say, okay, this is what your child is working on. This is my homework assignment for you to ensure that they get opportunities outside of group to practice these skills with siblings or what other, play opportunities that you can support with them or support them with having.
So I've always loved working with parents, like even from the very beginning when I was in the field pretty young myself, because I feel like I had babysat for many years. Like I started babysitting when I was really young and had babysat for many years. And I had kind of like a view into people's homes and kind of already had like a sense of family dynamics look like. Maybe that's why, I don't know. But I always felt like I really liked working with parents. And I noticed, I said often like, oh, well, I know I'm not a parent. However, this is kind of what I feel like I would want, right? If I were a parent. And then when I became a parent, my approach shifted even more, right? And I feel like I always saw parents as, part of the process, and that they needed to be part of the team and have a say in what happened in their home. I think that, a lot of providers or BCBAs really, I shouldn't say a lot, but I think one of the issues that we see from time to time is that, having a hard time, using too much jargon or coming in and just saying, okay, this is how we're going to do it. Here's the problem, listing out all the skill sets that your child needs to work on, all the weaknesses, all the deficits, all the ways that your child needs fixing, right? Even if we're not trying to come across that way as a parent, it could very much feel that way. Even if as a parent, we're like, yes, please come help. Please help. It still is that balance, right? And so, I'd like to talk about, meeting parents where they are and, what that actually looks like in real life. And, how do you adjust when a parent might, how do you know, like, if a parent feels overwhelmed or if they're not engaging, and how do you adjust for that?
I think you spoke to a lot of the challenges that we see as providers. I mean, me, myself, you mentioned always appreciating this part of the job of being a BCBA is supporting the parents. I can't say that I shared that experience myself. And I know that other clinicians might feel the same, where parent training or parent education or caregiver support, however you want to put it, is maybe one of their least favorite things about the job. And that was me for quite some time. I dreaded parent training. It was something that I didn't want to do when I was learning how to be a supervisor in my early career. I remember within my first year on the job as a supervisor, then having the responsibility of leading parent trainings myself, I would sweat buckets for hours beforehand because I was in my head all the time about, okay, how am I even going to be helpful whenever I see this parent? I would ask questions and they always say they're good. And then my company at the time had this expectation to have, to make sure that our meetings with parents ran for at least 2 hours at a time. So then I am left there, twiddling my thumbs, thinking of things to talk about. And so it wasn't a very reinforcing time for me. It was, and I think that for a lot of providers, it is that skill gap, right? It's like, okay, like how do I sit here and make sure that I am providing value to this parent? Because I want to make use of this time as much as they do. For a lot of them, they are taking time out of their workday or their way out of their day apart from their other responsibilities. So we need to make sure that we make it worthwhile. Like I don't want it to be a thing where, and I know a lot of families have expressed this in the past too, and providers expressed this in the past too, that they don't want it to be an experience where we just sit there and we check it off the list because it's something that we need to document as something that we did, right? So to provide that value, we need to really assess, right? And make sure that, okay, first off, why are we here, right? I want to make sure that I understand your motivations for being involved in treatment. Like we want to make sure if you are going to be involved in your child's care, that first off, you know what the barriers are to your child's learning. We want to make sure that we want to know what your concerns are. I think conversations like that are often missed between provider and the families. Just coming from my experience with my fieldwork trainees and having cases passed down onto me from other clinicians, I would review treatment plan after treatment plan and talking with clinician after clinician, sharing with me, parent never signed off on this. They didn't know that this was a goal. And I think that's where we need to really sit back and think about, okay, if they don't have any awareness of what we're working on, that's really where we need to start, right? They need to be part of that process where we sit down together and we say, hey, we did this assessment. These are the goals that I'm thinking about. I want to make sure they're in alignment with what you're thinking, what your concerns are for your child. I want to make sure that they're feasible for us to work on together as a team. Because it's not just going to be me and my BT or my RBT or my mid-level supervisor, right? Who are going to be supporting your child with building these skills. It's also going to be you. Yeah.
Has to be, right?
And I think that's something else that's often left out of the conversation, right? Because parents don't often have that expectation of, I'm a part of this.
Yeah.
Wow. Like I thought that I was going to hand off my child. You provide the services and that's good and everything will be okay. And I think at least when I was growing up in the field, that's a lot of what I saw as a DT, that lack of parent involvement and understanding of what we were really working on. Every now and then I'll have a parent jump into session and say, hey, what are you doing? BCBA hasn't explained this to me. So I want to know what you're doing. How is this going to be supporting my child? And I think we get a lot more of those conversations when the focus is the parents within the parent-led model.
Absolutely. And that's one reason, this is something that I really tried to do within our company because, I felt comfortable with parents and most of my staff did not. I think they would all agree right now. And
there's also sorry to interrupt, but there's some of that, almost like you're the enemy, right? It's like, if only the parent would just follow my direction, then everything would be fine, right? I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, but there's definitely disconnect. And I think that's, I don't know. I tried to train my staff by modeling, right? But then the more that I was pulling out and becoming more of the owner behind the desk more so than actually, in the first few years, I was in sessions all the time and training and modeling everything. And I feel like I was really at the point where I had to turn over the intake meeting to my staff was a really big pivotal moment. And I even realized within myself, I don't know exactly how to train this. And so that was one of the really things that I was really excited about seeing your, that you're doing this, that you're helping to train, BCBAs how to do this, because during those onboarding, intake meetings with parents, I mean, I didn't just go through the paperwork and check off things, right? Like I had like real conversations with them as far as what this is going to look like for them and what they should be seeing from our staff. And what, if they're not, things that they're seeing or not seeing from our staff, I wanted to know, right? Like that before they make any program changes, like the BCBA should be explaining to them why. If they have any questions, those questions should be answered. They have a right to agree or not agree to goals that we put in the treatment plan, right? And they don't have to stay away, right? Cause that was a thing that I think happens a lot is the parent, like you're talking about, like against the parent, like the bad talk of the parent is, they get in the way. Every time mom comes in, X behavior happens, right?
Right. That's great opportunity then, exactly, isn't it? Right.
Right. And that's, I have a point later on down in my notes, but I'll just go ahead and address it now. Like people's homes are not clinics. They're their real homes, and they have other children. They have pets. They have jobs. They have housekeeping responsibilities. They have their own self to take care of. Right. I know a lot of times we would get some discussions from texts and say, every time we show up, mom like disappears and goes and takes a nap. Why do you think she's taking a nap? Right.
Right.
No, we did have some policies where there had to be an awake, alert, individual, grown up there at all times. But, sometimes like parents also, especially if their child is, high needs, like their needs of the parent too. And then I like what you said about asking the parent what's important to them. I had one of my years and years and years ago when I was a tech, I had a parent who was really averse when her child hummed. And the BCBA on our case, I don't even think they were called BCBAs at that time, like the consultant, it was back in the 90s, the consultant on the case, was like, well, that's just part of who this kid is. They're going to hum. That's a stim and blah, 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 blah. Right. And then the parent was like, but I don't like it. And the BCBA is like, well, that's just not something that we can really work on. And then I don't know, fast forward a little time later and I got there to the session and the mom was like in tears and she said, I slapped my kid. She was like, I could not handle the humming anymore. And I slapped him and she was like, I feel horrible. I'm a terrible mom. Like this is all, but so it's like I think about that quite often. And I've thought about it over the years. And especially as I became a parent, our client is the child, the learner, but it's also the family, the parents, the caregivers. We have to give them the tools and we have to listen to them to try to work on these things together.
They may need additional supports, right? Not just 1 hour of parent training a month or whatever the funder allows. They may need therapy or, like something like that, right?
Absolutely. I think you noted on another thing too, that I think is often missed in conversations with, or just often missed in provider settings where maybe a provider has high caseloads and they miss those signs, right? Yeah. Oh, mom's really stressed out. And then that's a missed opportunity too to ask, okay, how are you doing? Like, how can I support you to make sure that you can do your best to support your child? And the example that you brought up, I think resonates with a lot of the families that we work with because it's a lot of how can we support mom or dad with regulation, right? That's not often a goal that we see with caregiver training goals that gets pushed out to insurance, right? But I think it should be. I can tell you myself, I'm a new mom. My son is 2. And it's the whining.
100%.
It's the whining that gets me. And then, identification of the function, attention days. Some days I can handle it more than others. Some days I'm like, okay, I can't take it. Like, please be quiet. So I have a mom right now that I'm working with, similar behavior, not whining, but more of like a flicking of behavior. So she also successfully was able to identify the function, okay, attention maintained.
Nice.
Right. And I was so proud of her. I'm like, yes, really understanding. And those are the light bulb moments, right? When you get a parent who's like, okay, like guess what, Zandra, like I identified this, like I know that it's attention maintained. I just don't know what to do with that information. So help me out, talk me through what would you do, right? So we talked about, okay, this is an attention maintained behavior. We want to really limit our attention. And I know that it's hard. And I think that's another key thing that we miss out of these conversations is like, we often hear providers flat out plainly say, ignore it. If it's attention maintained, don't give attention. But it's not as easy as it sounds, especially as a parent. When I became a mom and I realized that there were attention maintained behaviors, it's almost like an internal feeling. I don't know how to describe it. April, maybe you can describe it. It's like, oh, I can't really, this isn't a feeling really that I can push down. It's not something that I can really ignore, but it is something I'm recognizing that I need to work on because then that's going to support me with supporting the decrease of this behavior. Right. So, we talked through it with mom. I said, I know it's really hard. I know that it's something that is aversive to you. It's something that is, uncomfortable for you, but you're going to try your best to limit your attention and instead, or limit your attention when that behavior happens, right? Outside of those behaviors, I want you to focus on providing your attention for the behaviors that you want to see more of, right? So if we're flicking for attention, you are providing attention when, your child is using their hands to yourself. You're saying, hey, bud, like, I love that you're playing nicely with your things. You're playing nicely with mom. I love that. Just throughout the day, every opportunity that you get or remember to, give him that positive attention and limit your attention when you do see that target behavior.
Yeah. And sometimes it's even helpful to give, like, to help the parents to brainstorm their own replacement behaviors, right? Mm-hmm. What can I do instead? Because like what you're describing is like that itch that cannot be scratched, or like this like volcano that's just coming up and it's going to erupt at some point if I don't like do something here. And sometimes that doing something is fine. Here, take my attention. Just hush. Like, I can't. Because also in those moments, you have to make, I don't know if they're necessarily intentional, because by the time you're in that moment, you're not typically being very intentional or mindful. But it's like, sometimes you just make these like just swift decisions in your head of like, what's best right now. Me give in. And just walk, just walk what you give in. And yes, I've like strengthened this behavior a little bit, but I didn't yell, or I didn't hit, or I didn't do something that is more damaging to the relationship between the child and the parent, because that's real too. I mean, we look at these children, these learners that we're providing services for, and I know that across the board, we all work with a variety of children and individuals who need support. But, some of these behaviors can be relentless, right? Some 2-year-old behaviors can be relentless, right? And then yes, it doesn't stop. We got an 11-year-old. My child, I'm telling you, he's that I asked him yesterday, he's coming home from school every day, and he's so many noises, so much loudness, so much just big. I think he's like shifting into that. He's pre-adolescence. I think he's about to hit a growth spurt. So it's like this big Great Dane puppy just bounding through the house, crashing into everything. Like, he has no sense of his awareness of his body, because I think his body's growing. So he's having a hard time even knowing. And it dawned on me. I was like, he's got a kind of a more strict teacher. She keeps them very low key in the classroom all day. I said, hey, bud, I know we've talked about how you have to be pretty still in the classroom. Like, your teacher doesn't tolerate much movement in the classroom. But like, what about noise? And he was like, Mom, we have to be so silent. So like his little 11-year-old body, by the time he gets home, it needs movement and is just like verbal down diarrhea coming out of his mouth. And so I was like trying to figure out like, okay, how can we balance this, right? How can I allow space for this, regulate my own behavior, and come up with a plan of how can we like put this into something that's going to be more helpful, or even a skill that for himself that he could learn of, like how to regulate himself after school, right? So, and that's just one little tiny example.
I can't control my own behaviors, right? Like that's just me. So, like, I don't know.
You can, but it's
come on. There are many behaviors of mine that I cannot control, right? I think that we're all a work in progress, right?
That's just another ABA thing that like, I won't get on that too much, but that we do, like when we look at our goals for these learners, like, that's a soapbox I can get on of like really expecting realistic expectations, right? Because we're dealing with humans, we're dealing with children, but even if we aren't, like, we're dealing with humans, and none of us have like perfect behavior all the time. So, and that's what we have to look at too with parents, right? When we're dealing with parents, because, a lot of parents can feel judged too. So when we're looking at like trying to get that, parent buy-in and trust, I think one of the things that's so important that I tried to have with any of the parents that I worked with to the best that I could was build that connection and trust with them, so that they would tell me the truth. Because if they're not telling me the truth about how they're, doing what we're asking them to do, then it's not going to help. Or if they're not able to say, I hear your recommendation and it's just not something, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. Can we come up with a different plan?
Or I don't feel comfortable, or that's not our family, that's not how our family works, right? And
so what kind of advice do you have for our listeners of like how to support their team, to support the the parents and guardians that they work with, with building trust and helping them to see it's like a safe place and like not trying not to bring in like judgment to the game.
I think based on a lot of conversations that I've had with providers and trainees over the years, my number one thing really is to you come into a session with your agenda, right? That's a lot of our providers' focus is the things that you need to get done within that session. But the number one thing that I share is let's put down the agenda for a second. Take the time to get to know the family, their dynamics, what challenges look like in the home. Because that's really where parents are going to open up and say, okay, we're not going to talk about the report right now. Great, because I have actually a number of things to share with you that happened yesterday. I think just opening up the conversation to collaboration, right? And it's not just me, the provider, the professional, the expert telling you what to do. We want to make sure that our parents are a partner in their child's care because that's what they are. We can't do the service without them effectively.
Yeah, that's super important for them to be part of the team.
Yeah, something we're trying to build into our client handbook right now is like, what does a session actually look like? What should you expect a session to look like? I was talking to another BCBA and she's like, is that in your client handbook? Because man, I really need that. And then I went down the rabbit hole of, oh my goodness, this is nuanced, right? Like it's
going to look different for every company, even across
every
children.
family, right? Yeah. And so can we hug? Can we not hug? Can they come on our right? And there's just so much going on. And like, how much parent involvement do you want? But I think it's really important to kind of, we do that a day in the life of a tech or a BCBA when we're interviewing or job posting. Mm-hmm. I highly recommend that. So you almost need that for what ABA therapy looks like. What
this time with your child or with you as a parent is going to look like.
But also like the fact that this is a transition in faith, right? This is of course, for some learners, it's never right. They're always going to need support. But I'm going to say a majority of the cases, this is a transition and fade, right? So even giving that information and saying like, this is how it looks, right? I think can be helpful.
No, you bring up a good point, Stephen, because I think a lot about antecedent interventions all the time. When we talk about our learners, we talk about antecedent interventions. What antecedents do we need to put in place to make sure that we have the most success that we can for our learners, right? But I think we miss that putting antecedents in place for expectations with your team and for your families is a really important intervention to have, because without those expectations, there are going to be miscommunication. There's going to be frustration because parent wasn't told that they were expected to be a part of it, and then now insurance is knocking on their door saying we need a reduction of hours, right? Because it looks like you're not participating in session. A lot of what I was seeing across agencies was whenever I was passed down a case from another clinician, I may have received families, right, who had been in services for quite some time already, a couple of years, couple of months. I learned very early on that I needed to set my own expectations and not expect that the provider before me had set them for me. So every case that came my way, I treated as a new case. I am Zandra. This is what sessions are going to look like with me. These are my expectations as a provider, as far like little things too, like with scheduling. I've had cases come my way where parents were frustrated, or there was this mom in particular that was frustrated with me because she was trying to get in contact with me one day, and I was driving a lot that day, going house to house, to clinic to house, and I let her know that's a boundary that I set with all of my families. I don't pick up the phone when I'm in my car. That's a hard rule that I thought I was in an accident previously. I don't do that. Oh, but my last BCBA would drop everything, for a call with me. If you need time with me, here's my booking calendar. We can put time aside to make sure, your questions or your needs are met. But here's my booking calendar, and I'll make sure that your needs are addressed. But I'm in sessions throughout the day, and I'm driving. I can't get to you right now. Of course, there are cases outside of that, emergencies and whatnot. Right. Mainly, each case that comes my way, I want to make sure I set my expectations so that they have a well-rounded idea of what it looks like to work with me. I think that gets, and same thing again with trainees, with team members that you're working with. Biggest antecedent strategy really is to set those expectations in place and say, okay, if I fall through with this commitment, that's my bad. Like, I'll take accountability for that.
Yeah, totally. I do think that that is so strong. Yeah, you're right. Across all levels of what we do, right? With our techs, with our families, with our staff, with our admin people, with our whoever we communicate with when we're like, especially when we're treating or providing a service, right? Like, what is that going to look like? And what are your expectations, or what are my expectations, and how this is how I'm going to show up. And so when we go into, I don't know, this might be more applicable to in-home services, but I think there's a piece here that makes sense for clinic as well, right? But really taking into consideration culture and values, and not just general overarching culture, which is super important, but even understanding that each individual has their very own specific culture, right? And really looking at, this is part of the collaboration of the parent being part of the team. But as we're coming up with the treatment plan, whether it's your traditional tier model, whether it's, parent coaching model, what are some suggestions to be able to, assess the needs, of course, the skills and the needs, and like the barriers and the excess behavior or dangerous behaviors. Of course, there's typically so much on the plate when we come. Like, there's so much to look at, and we do have to prioritize, right? But how do we include parents in that collaboration?
In the beginning, again, with your antecedent interventions, especially when you're starting out with the case, assessing during the assessment process, making sure that you're not just there assessing the child and not having a conversation with them about what it is that you're doing, right? I think that there's some value in saying, okay, like, I'm assessing this and I'm assessing that, and that is because we would like to see, communication skills that look like this or like that. And what can you tell me tell me more about what you're seeing in this area, in communication or independent living skills. Just really trying to heavily involve them in the process, because you might learn right within that process that, and you spoke about culture, right? I think a big example that comes up a lot is within independent living skills, how important really is the use of utensils across cultures. How important really is it to receptively identify different foods that are not even involved in the home. You're not going to find that information out without talking to the caregivers.
Absolutely. I had forgotten all about even just the taxing and
oh yeah.
Cause that is, not even just food, but like that's a whole nother soapbox of like, what is really meaningful to this individual child, especially if they're an early learner, right? Like, we're getting things going with communication and understanding language, right? It's like, what is important to their life? If they live in a climate where they've never had to wear a winter hat and boots, like, we'll teach it to them eventually, but is that important to start with? And so I think too, with the eating and the sleeping and the dressing, really being open as a provider, being open. Yes, there's developmental norms. There's, the direction. What is it? Like the steps, right? Like, we typically do it in this order of things, but, asking the parent, like, what is important, and being okay with being a little flexible and looking at it, opening and looking at it differently, I think is super important.
Yeah, I guess there's also that piece of when can you say no? Because there may be things that the parent, and you kind of addressed it a little bit, right? But there are those things that it annoys the parent, or maybe they feel embarrassed by the behavior, right? And it's like, you know what? Like, there are just some things that you're going to have to live with, right? And this is, these are things that we are not going to fix, right? Because they're part of your child, and you're just going to have to be okay with it, right?
Or looking at, it got really loud all of a sudden.
Yeah, I don't know what that...
Or just looking at, okay, well, maybe if this, like, kind of going back to the example I gave earlier, maybe something that the provider thinks may not be that big of a deal, but it's a big deal to the parent, like take that into consideration, right? And see how you can meet them, with, okay, let's see if we can try to reduce this behavior, or give some replacement behaviors, or, give the parent, some suggestions or recommendations of changing their behavior.
I think a big piece of it too is that help supporting them with that reframe sometimes, and that education, because, for example, a big one that comes up often is compliance-based goals. Yes. Right there. And this, we see this across cultures too, where parents might say, oh, my child doesn't listen to me. I just want them to comply to everything that I say because I'm their parent. They need to show respect. They need to, follow everything that I'm saying. And so, yeah, I think what's important there is to support them with that reframe and education, and say, we want for our kids to be able to say no. Because the reality is when we have a child who is compliant 100% of the time, that increases the risk for potentially dangerous situations.
Yes.
Right. And especially if the overall goal is to support your child with independence, right? As an adult, we want to make sure that while they grow up, they have self-advocacy skills and that they're able to use them in situations to keep themselves safe.
Yeah, that was on my list of things that as self-advocacy is so important, right? And like, I don't know, again, I'm not saying that this is all across the board, but it does seem, I was saying this in another podcast and I'm using this word, not like, it seems like we're beating the no out of these children. And I know we're not beating them, but do you know what I mean? Like we're just saying, you're not allowed to say no. And what are we doing to this child, right? We are putting them in a situation where they're not allowed to say no. So, you know, like that's very scary, right? Especially if it's a child that does have a harder time communicating anyway, right? And then we're doing that. Yeah. So it's so important that is a part of all the programming we do.
Well, and I think it goes into understanding of developmental appropriateness too, right? Because we can have those conversations with parents if they're, there's this particular behavior that's annoying them or that they're concerned about, right? And you were talking about reframe, but there's also this thing that happens sometimes to parents of special needs kids or just parents in general. Sometimes we get very me focused and we're like, oh, why is this happening to me? Why is my kid having this trouble? Why is my kid making my life so hard? And we do get tunnel vision and we forget, or maybe we don't even know and we need someone to educate us. In my sense, I know very well and I still forget that, this is part of your child growing and learning. And this is part of the phase that they're in right now. Not saying that we have to just excuse it as that and not do anything about it, but having that understanding can be validating that, oh, wow, this thing that's happening right now, this is a thing that happens to a lot of kids at this stage of life. And, just not feeling alone can be something. Because let's think about like a 2 or 3 year old. How many, like those of you who are parents and are listening right now, if you've ever had a 2 or 3 year old child who has bitten someone, raise your hand. Like most of us are going to raise our hand, right? And so and this happens with providers too, who are not as, educated about the developmental appropriateness. And I've talked about this in other podcasts before, but okay, well, biting is a behavior that happens in that phase of life. And there's a lot of reasons for it. And yes, we're looking at functions and blah, 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 blah. But ultimately, we have to look at human first. We have to look at developmentally appropriateness, right? Okay, well, now, if they're biting and it's becoming a routine and we realize, okay, they're biting for attention or they're biting to gain access to something, okay, we're going to work through that. But to have that conversation with a parent of like, yeah, biting is something that happens to most kids at this age or in this phase of development. I mean, parents have told me this, like that I've worked with, that it feels like there's just always something and they're always dealing with behaviors and they're going to be dealing with this for the rest of their life. And their life is so hard. And I'm not saying it's not hard, but it's really easy to kind of get stuck in that. Because my kid's autistic, I'm having to deal with these behaviors. And sometimes I've heard from parents that it's helpful when I help them look outside of that.
Yeah.
I think that this is a good conversation to have with parents. It comes up a lot actually, where I'll have parents bring up a problem that they're experiencing and they'll seek validation. Like, I can't be the only one going through this, right? And I'll say, no, like you're not alone. I've supported families who are going through what you're going through. Strategies are going to support people differently. We're going to find out what works best for your child and for your family, but you're not alone. So, again, like not to minimize, but they are having these challenges. It's important to have that reframe, right? And that education. But I also think that it supports them with feeling, I think, less isolated too.
So question for you, like completely unrelated, kind of related, but like, so let's say you get a BCBA that wants your help and says, okay, I am awful at parent training, right? Like, I don't like it. Like you said, right? I'm sweating. It makes me nervous. I can't handle this. I'm being told I have to do it and I don't like it. It's the worst thing. What is kind of like step number one for someone in that situation so that they can get better at this?
I would want to sit down with this person and identify what their barriers are, right? It could be different for different people. For me, I felt that it was because I didn't really have a structure in place. I didn't go into it with a plan of, okay, what am I going to talk to this parent about? But then also knowing what to say and how to assess in the moment if, again, like we don't have to be tied to our agenda, for an entire hour or two, or however long your sessions are. But being able to identify how to support, how to hear the parent and say, okay, this is a moment where, okay, we're not going to be talking about the behavior intervention plan right now because mom is in like high distress, right? So I think that a lot of times when I sit down with providers and my trainees, that's one of the first conversations that I have with them, because it's one of the first challenges that they come to me with. It's like, I don't know how to talk to this parent. So we'll do some, especially with my trainees, like you, April, you mentioned modeling a lot for your team. So when I was focusing on a lot of fieldwork training, like I would bring my trainees in with me when I'm doing parent coaching. And just for them, the feedback that I received, at least just from them seeing really how my rapport is with my parents, right, I think was really helpful to see. Because previous to that, I've had trainees who were very, I don't know if cold is the word that I want to go with. I can't think of anything else right now, but again, just very agenda focused. And we don't want it to be about that all the time. Like we want to make sure that the families know that this is another human sitting across from you. Right. And I want to hear you. I'm hearing you out, and I'm going to support you with, I hear you, I see you. If something is on the agenda that we need to get to, I'm going to put that down for now, and we'll talk through this current problem together.
How do you work with your trainees to teach them how to walk that fine line? Because we hear it a lot, right? The BCBAs are saying, oh, I have to stay in my lane. I can't go outside of my scope. I'm supposed, especially with insurance, like models, right? We have to be so very careful with how we state things and how we do things. And so there's a lot of very rigidity as far as going into the session, like, and can I put my agenda to the side, right? I don't think I'm allowed to, because I don't even think I'm allowed to take water from this family because I have to stay, in my lane. I can't, there's no dual relationship or even question of it. I'm here for your child, and I have X amount of goals that I have to get done in an hour to be able to put in my data. And I'm sorry, I don't have time to talk to you, mom. And I think a lot of times that's RBT, right? That's the tech. And they're like, when the BCBA comes, then they can help you. But and then even sometimes the BCBA, like you said, has a hard time knowing how to be open and flexible to hearing the parent, and maybe even helping to bring them back to, giving them the space to talk, and then knowing when to kind of help bring that parent back in. Yeah, there's so many skills.
And just to
there.
throw one other thing in, right? I repeat this every podcast probably, but I think the average experience level of a BCBA is 3 years. And then you add on top of that, like you said, they've got 25 cases, and they have, I have no other time than to check off my checklist, right? There is no, oh, hold on, what did they just say there? Oh, that's way different than what we talked about last time. I should probably investigate that. There isn't that ability to listen, because I don't have time to listen. I have time to tell. That's the only time I have right now. So I'm sure that, there's a lot of difficulty.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that the system makes it really challenging for us to be human. Yeah. In that sense, because, right, you're right. We need to show up in our notes and submit something substantial to the funders, because they're the ones funding the service, right? So I would say too, it is important for us to be there for our families in a way that is compassionate, and hear them out. But there's also ways within documentation, right? And you mentioned this, April, we want to make sure that we're staying in our scope and not mentioning things that are outside of it that might look potentially like a dual relationship. But let's say parent comes to a session, parent training session, and they're in tears, which has happened before. Yeah. And I'm sure there are other providers here on listening in who might have had a session like that. They had an hour schedule to sit down with a parent. They had, a to-do list to go down within that session. Parent comes, completely breaks down and says, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. How can you help me? Right. So I think within situations like that, still very important to show up as the human that you are, show that compassion, hear them out, support them in any way that you can. Let's say that a new behavior came up. Okay, let's talk through that behavior. What are the barriers that you're experiencing to address them, right? Even if they're not particular set goals that you've mentioned to the funder before, those are things that you can share within your notes, right? Shift that more into behavioral language that I would be happy with, right? Say that, parent, BCBA and parent had parent training session today. We focus on recent recent challenges faced in the home that look like ABC. We talked through what potential functions are underlying. We talked about maybe setting events of this behavior. This is our plan moving forward for the next session, right? Because that's what they're looking for. That's what the funders are looking for. What happened during session? What did you address? What's your plan moving forward?
And just like, I don't know, I'll add this, like self-advocacy skills for the team as well, right? So for the techs and the BCBAs, and saying like I just hope that the BCBAs understand how much power they have in this situation, because they are in such high demand. And so maybe they could say, no, I'm not doing that way, right? I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to actually talk to this person like they are a human. I want to, like, this is why I got into this field. It isn't to fill out a checklist. It is, right? It's not to write the reports as fast as I possibly can. It's to help families. That's the whole reason I'm here.
It also presents an opportunity to create a new goal that they might need support with.
Yeah, I just think going back to your company and saying, no, we need to change this, because obviously the way we're doing it right now doesn't work for many people, right? There's a lot of burnt out providers, and how helpful is a burnt out provider? Not as helpful as a not burnout provider, right? And so, if we could do this differently, and bring the humanity back into this human field, I think that we all would be better, right?
Yeah, we've definitely had a lot of conversations around that very thing. Yeah. I do think, though, it brings it back to experience.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
When you're just starting out. And you're new and you're young. And I mean, you learn these things as you go. You figure these out as you go. And sometimes it's hard to advocate for yourself if you don't feel confident in what you're doing.
Or you don't even know what to advocate for. Right.
And so I think that's why it's great that we have people who are focused in on helping, like offering supervision like Zandra does. And, there's quite a few that we talk to and work with who are really out there, really helping provide a lot of instruction and education and support for those who are working to become a BCBA and who are new in the field, right? Yeah. And that's what hopefully these conversations can help too, to help people know like what to look for even.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's the big reason why I wanted to support with remote supervision, right? I think we all started at that level where we're feeling like not confident, like you don't know what you're doing. There are still things today that a lot of us as BCBAs, 10 plus years down the road and with experience, don't know. And that's, I think the whole point, right, is to normalize that we're always going to be, we're always students, right? We're always going to be students. So I like to share with my trainees, like you might feel this way right now, but even when you pass your boards and 5 years and with 5 years under your belt down the road, there's always going to be something that you're going to be learning.
And I think it's important to have that expectation, as we were talking about expectations. And I think that the second anyone, whether it's a BCBA or anyone in this world, gets to the point where they feel like, oh, I don't have anything else to learn. I know everything. Then we don't want to be there either.
Yeah, I think reframing this as like you're going to, like I had a mentor, like I'll always remember him telling me this, where if you're not making mistakes, then you're not doing anything, right? So like I think when you're learning and growing, you're going to make mistakes, and that feeling comes with it, but right, like that's how you master a skill, right? Is you have to do it. So I think maybe going a little bit more gentle on ourselves for not being able to do this right, and you have to be able to practice it and be okay with not getting it right the first time.
Well, and I think too that gives us more compassion. Of course, when we have more compassion with ourselves, it does give us more compassion with others, and that would be kind of my ask as you go into your week after listening to the podcast, is like really just sitting back and reflecting on that, of like how if you are in a role where you do interact with families and parents, caregivers, we've been saying parents, but we're meaning all the caregivers to those individuals and the families, what's some compassion, that you could bring to working with them, like that you would want someone to give you, right? Knowing that we're all just in this life learning the best we can. And we all have good days and bad days. And we all have triggers and so I think just, looking at, okay, how can I show up in one little small way, compassionately, because we can be compassionate and stay within our ethics and our guidelines. In fact, we should be, right? Sure. That's part of it. So, as we end today, what I'm going to ask you, Zandra, if there is one shift you wish business owners and providers would make when it comes to supporting parents, what would it be?
Expectations. expectations. I think, again, just tying it back to your antecedent interventions, making sure that upfront families know what they're going to get out of this service. Because I think a lot of this frustration that come out of families, right, is when they have an idea in their head of how everything's going to go down and it goes differently. Right. So I think to be very transparent about what your commitment is to them is going to be very, very helpful. And I can't say confidently that I've seen that throughout my years across different companies. I think that is a good place to start.
Like for practitioners that are burnt out, do you have like just kind of a first step, or is there something that you would recommend that they do to kind of start their journey to get out of that?
For them to really look inward and identify what their personal barriers are, that might look different, right, for different people. Yeah. I think earlier you mentioned, April, about how, there are different parts of this work that people just don't enjoy, and that's okay. Like, people are entitled to have their own preferences. They're entitled to have different parts of the job that they love and different parts of the job that they hate. Like I mentioned, I didn't love parent training when I first started out. Now I do. It's my main focus now, really, aside from my remote supervision. But I think in that self-reflection, people also need to identify what fills their cup, right? If it's parent support, then please come join us. We have a school set up. It's a community that I call the Parent Coach Collective. We are a group of BCBAs and trainees who are really supportive of the parent-led model. A lot of our members are business owners who that is their main model. They're doing parent coaching. We have other providers who are employed with different organizations, and they're intrigued, like they're interested in learning more about parent coaching. They want to, just refine their parent coaching skill set and just see how leaders in the space are working within this model, and how does it look different than traditional models. And so it's really just a space that I wanted to create for us to really have these kinds of conversations about how to better support families. What does that look like if I wanted to focus on parent coaching as an independent practitioner? And before this call, I was listening to one of you guys' episodes, and I'm forgetting the title about it, but the discussion was around the isolation that practice owners sometimes feel when they open up their practice and there's no one else really that they can lean on. And so the feedback that I'm receiving within the Parent Coach Collective is that is what this is providing to them, right? That sense of camaraderie and just being able to lean on the community to support each other.
That is really beautiful, because we need more of that. So we need as many spaces of those that we can provide, and especially it's specific to parent coaches. You can go to the show notes and you will find all the links of where you can find Zandra and reach out to her, and on social media and her website and all of that. So you can go check that out there. And then also, if you haven't already, come join us at the
support group.
Our support group that we have for our business leaders, and we have moved over to Discord now so that we can continue to offer that as a free support. And we have our monthly meetings, and so we'd love to see you over there. That will also be in the show notes. And at the time that this is airing, Stephen's book will be out in the open, out in the world live. So please click on the links in the show notes, and you got
to stop putting that in.
And you will be able to know how to access Stephen's new book. Mm-hmm. He hates it when I do that. Makes it even more fun.
I'm glad that like this. How do I change that behavior?
You don't want to. Your life would be dull and boring.
Oh, really?
Well, thank you so much, Zandra. I really appreciate your time and your expertise and just your openness to be able to have this conversation. All right. Well, thanks everyone, and we will see you next week.
See ya.